was kind of a difficult time period for myself. I was a graduate student, didn't have any money. I was chasing the art. I was really chasing the art so much that I didn't really have a home, and yet stuff in poetry seemed to be working okay for me. And he went through my manuscript, and we actually really talked about life and what it means to be an artist. And I feel in that moment, he kind of I mean, I would be a poet regardless if I met Terrance, but in that moment, he saved me. He was like, don't be concerned about like being a mainstream poet, just follow the art. And he also said, you have to find your tribe of people. And he named some poets. He read my work, he went through my poems. He's the first person I met who really understood what I was doing. So it was just a lot of fun to sort of talk poetry. And he's like, you need to read Wanda Coleman, you need to read Matea Harvey, Thalius Moss, which I was reading already, not Wanda Coleman, I mean after Cave, but these were the poets I was reading already. So he understood what I was doing. So I just want to talk a little bit about poetry mentors and how did you get into poetry? You were an artist in college, basketball player, and I'm curious about, did you develop an obsession with certain people you wanted to study with? I know you frequently mentioned Wanda Coleman, Yusuf Komunyakaa, there might be Gwendolyn Brooks, and obviously Etheridge Knight, who's no longer living, but can you talk a little bit about how you got into poetry? How did it take over your visual art?
You guys have worked so hard to get me here. It's a beautiful building. These very serious questions that you're asking me, going so wonderfully on about. I do believe in teaching, so I appreciate that. That's all true that she's saying. It's still though, sit next to you in front of everybody while we're like talking about that. I'm like, oh, we gotta figure out how to get everybody a little bit warmer. So how can I give you an answer that will make y'all stop talking about me? That's really what I'm trying to say. That's how I felt about that introduction. Like, oh my goodness, too much. Because, and so here's how it's connected. Mentoring to me is like, you know, it's so hard if you do any art form. If you play the piano, or if you write little stories on the side, maybe if you cook too, this could be a good one too. I don't know that much about cooking, but let's do cooking. So, all you really are doing sometimes, if you're like taught your children how to cook or something, this is bringing people into the kitchen. Like you really can sit in the living room and talk to them about cooking. You kind of got to be there, and they do too. So if that's true, like every time the mother or the father is there cooking, it's still a new process for them. It's a new child that's coming in. If you follow me, like everything has to be calibrated to that moment where you're just trying to make something. So if that's true, like the whole power dynamic of like mastery and master and student for me, I just don't really believe in it so much. So now at NYU, I say to my graduate students, this was like, again, I do talk about teaching. So I mean, it is true, I do care about it. So I have a lot of mentors, if you want to call them that, a lot of people that I support and run around with, but I'm trying to relate this for y'all, like why it would matter and what you would get out of it. It's just that, you know, it's better if we're more equals than master. That's too much pressure on everybody. So I think even, you know, like you hear me sort of, I have a critique, I have these ideas, like the idea of Jesus' sister, like I don't believe like the way I grew up in the Baptist church really allows for that. But while I was sitting there though, you know, that's the kind of stuff I would be thinking. So, you know, I wanted to like enter it into the conversation. What do you think? Yeah, sister, what would that be like? You know, so I like a classroom space that's flexible like that, where the preacher or the teacher can receive an unexpected question and have that like open things up. You follow me? So that, if that motivates me to hang out with like a great unusual poet like Michelle and saying like, oh, these poems are really interesting, you're gonna have a hard time. Like, they ain't like 1, 2, 3 kinds of poems, which super excites me. I want to learn from that. So of course mentor, of course supporting, but also just saying like, wow, it's just like nice to know somebody that writes like that. It's nice to know somebody that thinks like that. So for me, that's like up and down the spectrum in terms of old poets, white poets, queer poets, straight poets. I just try not to have any standards when it comes to relationships with people who are like in it. So even bad poets, which I've said before, I say this all the time, but it's true. Like, I actually don't even really care that much if you're a bad poet, if you're just trying to be a little bit better every day. And maybe that's true for my enemies too, you know what I mean? Like, just a little bit of effort every day. I'm not measuring how much you gotta be, but just a sense of that effort will make the results, whether the poem is awesome or not, sort of like take some of the pressure off of that. So I ask that, as myself sitting at the table, as a teacher, as a person looking at a blank page, and I really cover relationships that are like that. So I do have to be curious about you. I mean, I mostly don't hang out with anybody. I just stay home and talk to myself and write poems. So I am coming out for, interesting, stimulating, whatever that means. But it doesn't happen that much. But that means, like, if I encounter that in the classroom or really in a book even, actually, I do want to maintain that kind of relationship. So, always being excited when I hear about new writers or encounter new writers, because I'm not looking to be anybody's mentor. I'm looking for peers that are, again, having that same effort to, kind of let's see us almost right eye to eye, if that makes sense, just to kind of look. That's not the same thing as universal, It's more like intimacy. You're just looking for somebody that has a shared sense of what it means to really want to get close, So, yeah.
I mean, to be fair, I have a classical music background. So I'm used to working one-on-one with someone, so I can totally understand what you're saying. And I just didn't have that kind of relationship in poetry yet until I met Terrance. So everything you're saying makes sense, but to be fair, to take off the pressure from him, that comes from my music background. I don't know. Well, I have the rest of these questions, so hopefully it won't be too much pressure on you in a way, but I feel like we might have some young poets in here, and so I kind of, gather some questions.
Did I make you nervous with that comment? I mean, please just ask whatever.
No, it's okay. So, let's see. I was actually thinking about your current book, which we can.
Dumb questions. That's my own
Okay.
I'm just kidding.
And versus your first book, right? I was curious because I have a poem in my book about Jordan Davis. I don't know if you know. So he's my cousin's cousin who was murdered at a gas station for playing music too loud. And so I read these at readings, and I kind of made this decision I was going to read it at every reading because I always have about a few people come up and they really want to talk about it. And they're emotional as my family, sort of during that time. So I guess I was thinking about, what was a moment when you realized your words weren't just like a byproduct of a very long process? You know what I'm saying? When did you realize that sharing poems had power with your readers? I don't know if you can.
See, now I have a really smart aleck answer for that because, that's not a fixed answer though. It's not really a fixed response.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I would start chatting more on the Baldwin poem, so I know what poems work. I mean, I get out, and in fact, the dilemma, I think I'm still answering your question, has been, as I sort of suggested at the beginning, was that I started writing these poems because I cannot get. Everywhere we're turning, or if you are just trying to, and I always watch PBS. I was like a total nerd growing up, so I have always been interested in the news. But now there is no news. You know what I mean? So sometimes when things are really bad, like Fox, like today, that was the whole thing about the Korea thing that got me started. So we'll cover that so that people can because we're exhausted. So you will go to any place where they're sort of just giving us something else to talk about. You know what I mean? And so if you are an artist, as I said earlier, and you're just trying to be tuned in, which is all I try to do as a person, as a writer, I just try to be open, I try to be aware, so that, just if you can't see it in the work, it's why they would be both assassin but also sonnets. So they are sonnets, that's the noun, for my assassin. So that whole dilemma of trying to not do black and white stuff, not simply say, dictator, tyrant, everything's terrible, but really trying to say, as I said in the poem I started with, it's sort of not enough. It's not enough to be blindly patriotic and be like, I love you, I love you, I love you. it's also not enough to be like, I want you destroyed, I want you destroyed. So that is a very precarious moment that we live in. But that is where we live in, and some would say the consequence of that would be something like a dystopia, which maybe we are at least needing something like a dystopia. Maybe you don't agree. So all I'm saying to you is like, I know that's none of your business. Maybe that's just all me. But as a writer, as a person who has been writing for, more than 20 years, when this happened, in my shock, all I know how to do is write poems. So, have I been to any protests? A couple, but really, all I know how to do is write poems. I don't even like people that much. And so all I gotta do is go home and try to respond, and try to bring some shape to it, and try to remember that they are sonnets. So whoever approaches me from whatever side of that very fake dynamic of, these are good or these are bad things, I just say, well, there's sonnets. Like, that's all I can kind of fall back into.
Okay, so why the sonnet?
I just said why. Like, it keeps me from doing one thing or the other. It keeps me from being like, I want you destroyed. I want you destroyed. It makes you have to make a turn. So I think this is the point. So with the earliest one, like the one where I stopped and started talking, because again, I'm still writing them, but when I'm writing them and they're so hot, I partly am excited to share it with you, because I'm like, well, this is what I gotta do. Like, I don't want to keep reading these poems. I know y'all want to hear them, but I'm like, I don't read them. I wrote them. All they do is trauma for me to keep reading these poems. Sometimes you can see it. Like, I get traumatic because I'm like, that's what they were a response to where we're living. So anyway, here's the point. So with the one, I'm like, okay, so I have to explain who James Baldwin is. Do I know that in Texas? Do they know who Laurie is? They might know who. And this is stuff I'm working out. So I'm like, do I put that in a poem? And I'm like, you know what, man? I'm just going to dig into it. And then at the end of it, I'm like, well, do they know, like, Lord was gay and James Baldwin was gay? And so, like, if you put those two eyeballs and see one in his head, like, he looks up. These are the first people he's ever seen. Like, and he's like, oh, these are like, these gods. They're gods. But they're also they. Like, of course God would be like a he or she. He'd be a they. So the whole dynamic. And what does that mean is when I'm teaching my students and I'm like, they're saying, I'm a they. I'm like, man, I'm old. I'm from the South. I'm going to struggle with that. And they're like, oh, no. And so I said to a student, here's the kind of irony of what I'm getting at in the poems. I was with my student who was a they. And the first thing I was like, well, this would have been like what white people would have. This is how my head works. White people trying to really say, I am trying to be sympathetic. I am limited in my experience, but I do want to understand. And so will you be patient with me while I try to understand that? But white people are so afraid to even venture into that dynamic. But that's where I am. Like, that's what I'm sort of advocating for. So I say to the student, I say, but we should all want to be plural. Shouldn't we? Like, everybody should want a plurality. And I'm like, even in one of the poems, I have a line in one of the sonnets, and it's like, Prince proves that a real man has a beautiful woman in him, which is what Prince proved. Like, Prince, everything that was feminine in Prince is what made him so sexy and masculine. So I'm like, that theorem is proved. Prince proves a real man has a beautiful woman in him. Therefore, I got to try to get beautiful women in me. Beautiful women. So what does that mean for me to act on my own sense of femininity? And I'm like, I got evidence. So I'm saying to the student, I believe this, and I say, yeah, but we should all want to be plural, even like God. And then the student's like, you're kind of appropriate. We got that kind of thing. I was like, okay, I get it. But I'm like, but that is, the point I'm making to you are two things. I withdraw my comment. It's an effort to kind of connect and open it up and be like, that's what happens in the poem. Like, of course, God would also want to be a they. And that's my gesture towards the whole community, without saying that I understand it, or without saying I'm not going to steal, just this student in particular, just because you had your fingernails painted silver, that does not make me assume that I'm defending my position here. Like, I was like, when I saw that, I was like, I'm not going to paint my fingernails, but maybe my toenails. It's going to cross it. No one would know. Be on my shoe, and I would just feel good about that. So therefore, I would still be a he, though. That would not make me decide. So anyway, so I'm working this out. Do not say this to the student. Well, the poem, so all of that stuff that comes down in a poem about Audre Lorde, James Baldwin, we're moving through the poem, and then that quick little turn, the volta, if you see how I'm bringing it all together. The volta in that poem is the sudden have Stevie Wonder look up and see them, and then the poem turns and says, I think I'm doing all sounds too, so there's purple, and there's purred, and then odds are God also prefers to be referred to as they. And everything I've given you is like everything that has kind of come up to that moment in the poem. And of of course Trump is in there too. I'm just thinking again, all the stuff that I'm circling around with Jimmy, with you. But do I need to say that? Do I need to go through all of that before I read the poem? I don't know. I mean, I just read it, so.
So I don't mean to, but I'm gonna just put you on the spot here, because I saw Terrance talk in New York for the New Yorker Festival a few years ago, and there was a Q&A after, and there were some very young poets, and I mean, maybe I'm misremembering it, but I don't think so. So maybe you could call this, but a couple of young poets were saying they felt that you have a responsibility to talk about politics. So I want to know if you agree with that. The panel went silent. This is a few years ago, but I feel like there has been a sort of uprising with young poets who want to be able to talk about what's going on in the world. So what's your response?
Well, I don't know what my answer was then, but I would like to write about whatever I want to write about. So whatever that means. So I don't even get hung up on all the personal is political. I do believe that. And political, I just say, all I'm ever trying to do as a writer is get free. So there's enough in the world. Just think about me and my personal prerogative. So whatever difficulties I face as a human being on the planet, when I am sitting down to just make something, to be creative, I want to be as free as possible, to be as sad as possible, be as mad as possible, to be as confused as possible. All feelings. None of that has anything to do with genre. None of that has anything to do with, like, you know, mode. Am I writing an essay? Am I humming? Am I being political? Am I being... So I try to be open. And I think the poems sort of, sometimes are enacting that, sometimes I don't know really what y'all are getting. This is why I started with Wanda Coleman, right? Like, if we kind of keep all the way back to the beginning, I do get around. So I'm both trying to, like, set y'all up to see what I really believe in, to kind of hear some of that, and then have us talk, as I hope we're going to do here in like 2 seconds. But I think everything that's happening, I'm trying to enact that question. Like, what do I think? I'm just trying to get free. Like, I want the poems to do whatever they want to do. And because I am a moral person, because if I think that we are in the midst of a dystopia, you know, that's likely to show up in my poems. You know what I mean? And so I rely on that. I rely, as I said, about always watching the news. I don't ask that everybody does it. It's just what I do. You know, it's just interesting to me. You know, BBC, all of them. So I've just grown up as that kind of just a side thing for no particular reason. And suddenly, though, the volume of it to be so intense that it's informing the work. So I'm saying I would love for things to go back to some other, you know, less dysfunction, or whatever that might look like. But I do think, like, you know, all the stuff that we have warned ourselves for, whoever you are, like, whatever you have fought for and what your parents fought for. So let's say this wouldn't be true for my parents, but let's say if my parents were just like saying, you know, racism is going to end America, so you have to be super conscientious so that racism does not end America, if they had said something like that. And then I would be like, well, now we're here. You know, I do feel like we are in the midst of the thing that everybody, the civil rights movement, MLK, that they were warning against would be sort of like a, you know, person with no sense of, like, moral center to me. And so all I'm saying is, all you do is see me in my poems try to work that out. And because I'm so concerned, I have to do science so that I don't get too stuck, so that I don't keep going in with the thing that I think I'm eager to do something different. If you hear what I'm saying to you, like, sure, everything's political, and I want to just be free. I do not want to have to be talking to y'all about this. I'd rather just be talking to you about, you know, something else. You know, I would still be running around. I would still be writing poems and books. I guess I will after. But the intensity that I bring to you is the concern about, like, man, I can't even write no poems right now. That's how crazy this shit is. I can't even, like, sit down and write a poem. To me, that's the concern.
I'm gonna read some questions that some of the audience members wrote, but I was curious just about, you know, there's a million poets out there throughout time, and you picked in your recent book, At Third Night, to I was just curious if you'd like tell us why you picked and you wanted to sort of devote this book to.
I think we were talking earlier with Octavio about, I was saying, like, I usually think about things, actually I have, you know, all kinds of theories for myself to help me get through the world. A lot of them are in the book. But one idea of just like the two hands. So a lot of my motives are just personal motives, and then the other hand is to kind of make it a little bit more intelligent or palatable for people. So on the one hand, He was the first poet I almost met when I was in college. Someone that I had read, and I had started reading poems of my own, like while I was playing basketball or whatever, and someone showed up who knew Etheridge Knight, and he was like, do you want to meet him? But I was like, oh man, I got a basketball tournament. Actually, it was at NYU, and we won it. I averaged 10 points a game, but I did not go. This is my freshman year. I did not go meet Etheridge Knight because I went to that basketball tournament, and then Etheridge Knight passed away. And so I've always regretted that. I've always thought about him, and he was really ground floor for me because he had been in prison, and that's what I know, like it's all kind of basic stories. Like he had been a poet who had discovered poetry when he was in prison, and then he got out and he kind of made his living as a poet. So that was just, he was from Mississippi, he had moved up north to Indiana. He's married to Sonia Sanchez for a couple of years, but he was a terrible partner, he struggled with drug addiction even after prison, and was just a really interesting poet who also, because he was such a hustler, just wound up being in all of these groups. So for a minute he was like a black arts poet with Baraka, but then they was like, he ain't no black arts poet, he's a hustler. Because he'd be like, hey, let me get $5 from you, that kind of thing. And so then he was like a deep image poet with Robert Bly, and these sort of nature poets up in Minnesota, and then they were like, he was always borrowing money. That was all, I collected stories. Those were always the stories that people told me. Galway Canal, he was like Denise Levertov, he was one of the apartheid poets. He adopted some kids from South Africa, so he just had this really wide reach. And he was a blues poet. He was also a Southern poet. He had been in the military. So for me, what he represents and represented was just this freedom that I'm talking about. He was like a really good model for me to feel like I need not just settle into one kind of poem or one kind of poet, but to really chase multiplicity. So I wasn't being chased out of the circles as he was, but I did understand that the impact on his work that had meant that he just wrote out all kinds of really interesting poems because he was always in these different groups.
Okay, so we have a couple questions here. Okay, let's see. What role did your family have on your becoming an artist, writer, and how did they encourage, support, and influence you?
Well, my mother had me when she was 16, and there was some old lady in the neighborhood who was like, I'll take him from you, I'll take him from you. And I feel like she wasn't giving my mom like the money that she was asking, and she was like, and if I had a little bit more money, I mean, this is, where we came from, she just couldn't afford to like have an abortion. And so she's always told me this story as a way of like saying, look how you turned out. Like, I'm so glad, I was so glad I couldn't get that money together, And so, again, a way of kind of like liberating me. Like, yeah, you're right, that was a close call. But because of that, where we came from, they just never really bothered me. So I made, I made A's, I played basketball with the school basketball scholarship, so there was never any discouragement, but also never any encouragement. So I just felt like I could do what I wanted to do. So that, by the time when I got to college, and my dad was like, oh, you should maybe major in business. And I was like, man, if you had told me that when I was 8 years old, that's literally what I said to him. If you had said that to me when I was 8 years old, I totally would have done it. Too late. Like they had let me draw and paint and sing and run around just because I was doing well at it. And so all that means for me now, like again, this is the two hands thing. I have tried to turn that into a pedagogical approach, which is to say keeping people open to everything. And so, even that goes back to like leveling the playing field in terms of encouragement and discouragement. I'd rather like sit next to you and look at the thing and be like, oh, this is a problem we have to solve, as opposed to someone who sort of, as I said, sitting in the living room telling you how to cook and hoping you can figure it out. So I feel like in a weird way, that's what I got out of my upbringing. Like there, my dad was my stepdad, was military, my mother was in prison, worked in prison guard, now he does that. So it's very like, get up and go to bed. The only sort of thing that we had really going for us in that discipline was that my mother worked at night and my father worked out of town. So my brother and I, we would just get up when they left. So we were, two lives. So I'm still a night owl, because that's when we would have music going. As we got older, maybe, girls would come over and stuff, but we definitely had this idea of like order. We got up, we had to get ourselves out on time. We always did that. I never missed any days of school, except for one, third grade. But otherwise, I was there. So the point I'm making is like they just never really felt that they had to say anything to me. They just felt like I would be okay because all I had to do really was graduate from high school and we would that would have been a kind of a benchmark, either one of